Anti-Israel sermons were delivered in hundreds of thousands of mosques and Islamic schools across Pakistan. These were aftermath scenes in Pakistan's capital Islamabad after weekly Friday congregation. Tens of thousands of people came out on the streets alone in the capital city. There were similar rallies in other major urban centers to protest over Israel's latest round of nearly 2 weeks long aggression, which left over 250 people dead, with almost one-third among them women and children in the occupied Palestine. Officially, Pakistan observed the Friday as a Palestinian Day to express solidarity with the innocent Palestinians. On the streets, people in Pakistan raged with anger like elsewhere in the Muslim world since the apartheid regime attacked and desecrated Islam's third holiest mosque after forcible eviction of Palestinian residents in the occupied eastern Jerusalem Al-Quds and subsequent unilateral war the Zionist regime imposed on Gaza.
I want for government, he declared jihad. There is the only one solution to liberate Palestinian. It's only way jihad.
The disappointment and feeling of hopelessness among people against Organization of Islamic Cooperation or the OIC are growing to a tipping point. No longer people in Pakistan seem to be taking 57-member bloc of Muslim countries as their genuine representative body. If you talk to anybody in this gathering or elsewhere in Pakistan, everybody wants government of Pakistan and other Muslim countries to go for some sort of a joint military action against Israel. The reason being is no one is willing to trust OIC about their big statements, the statements of the condemnation. These are the customary statements which they come up with every time. But there seems to be some sort of a change. We have seen for the first time that Malaysia has spoken so aggressively on Israel. It's said that it is unintended inaction on the part of the OIC which has emboldened Israel, because of which Israel committed aggression against unarmed Palestinians. Similarly, Turkey has spoken about setting up an international force of protection which should have its own military, which should have its own finances, and that has been supported by some of the countries, like Pakistan has supported it. But again, the shape of that international protection force remains unclear. Turkey wants its physical presence. Where? Inside Palestine, the occupied Palestine? That's unlikely to happen. But I think they can have their military presence in the Mediterranean Sea. They can have their own joint navy over there, and that could be a possible deterrence to prevent Israel for attacking Palestinian in future, until and unless there is this kind of a deterrence by the Muslim countries, maybe some of the Muslim countries, Israel would never be stopped. Now, behind all this stuff is a deep-seated religious agenda by the Israel. If you see the syllabus of being taught in the religious schools in Israel, they are saying Palestinians are your enemies, Muslims are your enemies, and they have to demolish the Al-Aqsa Mosque, where they want to construct the third temple, which is under the Jewish religion. It has its own significance. They think their Messiah, their prophet, which Muslims call it as a Dajjal, he would emerge and he would have his own government, and Al-Quds Sharif at Al-Aqsa Mosque would be its headquarters. Now, that is a deep-seated religious agenda which unfortunately many people ignore, that is being taught in the occupied Palestine. On the other hand, in Muslim countries, there is a label upon Muslim that they are the terrorists, they are the militants, and the Quranic verses of jihad have been removed from the syllabus books in Pakistan, because Americans think that it is creating terrorists, which is completely nonsense. Terrorists are being created in the occupied Palestine. First, they try to evict people from the eastern Jerusalem, the Al-Quds Sharif. And when people resisted, they attacked Al-Aqsa Mosque. And when over there people resisted, then obviously the Hamas had to do something. They just launched few rockets, and as a result of which 250 people have been killed by Israel. More than 1,600 people have been maimed and injured alone in Gaza. And the resistance has come from the Gaza at a time when no other Muslim country was willing to help Hamas. Because Hamas is a terrorist who thinks that it is Israel. It is some of their allies. So unfortunately, there is very sorry state of affairs. The Muslims groups are being branded as terrorists who are not terrorists. Hamas is a duly elected government in the occupied Palestine. It is not a terrorist organization. And it is Israel, which is a terrorist state, which has been killing unarmed Palestinians. It has been evicting people. It has evicted millions of people by force, and they have become refugees elsewhere in the world. This is a very unfortunate scenario, but the only glimmer of hope is that this time around some of the Muslim countries like Turkey, like Malaysia, Pakistan, or maybe Iran, they may have a kind of a joint bloc, if not in months to come, maybe in years to come, that could possibly create a deterrence against Israel. That is something which would stop Israel from committing aggression. The other option is that these countries can possibly smuggle in the kind of the weapons that Hamas needs. That can prevent Israel from committing aggression. These statements that are coming from the OIC and all these Muslim countries, that only indicates that they don't want to do anything other than issuing customary condemnation statements. Not everywhere pro-Palestinian rallies were safe. 6 were killed and 14 others were injured when an anti-Israel rally was soaked with the blood after a terror attack in Chaman, southwest of Pakistan. Many suspect pro-Israel terrorist groups behind the attack.
They want to prevent Pakistani public to attend these rallies. These elements, they fear that if Pakistani public attend these rallies, Pakistani government will get under pressure and they will definitely do something against Israel.
Anti-Israel sentiments run high in Pakistan given the regime's policy of systematically killing innocent Palestinians and evicting them from their homes over the course of decades. Javed Rana, The Digital Dispatch, Islamabad, Pakistan. The growing tide of anti-Israel sentiments. What you see behind me is just tip of the iceberg of what is happening in the country. More than half of $52 billion black CIA budget is spent on espionage network in Pakistan. How would you handle it?
The US has looked upon Pakistan as an ally at one point and then as an enemy at the same time.
That is going to be the first legal reason on the basis of which he is going to be instantly ousted by the Supreme Court of Pakistan.
Joining us live, Javed Rana, who's an expert on politics and geostrategic issues.
In the world politics, which is not being driven by any moral principle, it is being driven by the hard geostrategic realities. In a broader picture, more countries would aspire to have nuclear weapons.